Hi, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our virtual class in quantitative methods. We are on week 3 of our virtual class for the regular trimester 2113T. The topic that we have for today is about the different levels of measurements. Today's objective will focus on the following. First is the identification of the different levels of measurements. And second would be recognizing the importance of studying the levels of measurements. So why is level of measurements important? So basically we have two reasons. First would be knowing the measurement level will cause you to choose how to translate the data from that variable. And second, and the most important, is that knowing the level of measurement causes you to choose which statistical analysis is appropriate for that research. Okay, so way back in your senior high school, you had your research subject, and then you were instructed to conduct a research and present it to the panelists. So one of the questions your panelists might have asked you is about the type of variables you have in your study. Okay, recall that we discussed that on the first and the second week about the variables, wherein we have there the quantitative or qualitative variables. We have also the discrete and continuous for the quantitative variables, and independent and dependent variables. So why did we, or why do we have to know about that? So again, for a specific type of variables you have, there is an appropriate statistical analysis for that. So if you declare or you misdeclared a variable, it follows that you are also using a wrong statistical analysis. So that would void the whole study or research. That's why you have to get the variables correct so that you can use the appropriate or correct statistical analysis. Okay, so it's like wrong input, wrong output in this scenario. Okay, so here are the four levels of measurements. So you also have here at the background, you already have an idea of what are these levels of measurements. So the lowest would be the nominal scale. Why is it considered the lowest of the four measuring levels? Because it only gives labels or names to several categories when nominal data has no order or no arrangement. For the ordinal scale, the interval between measurements is irrelevant, whereas ordinary data is ordered or ranked or arranged in a certain way where the positions will be displayed or certain. And we have here the third, the interval scale. In here, there is no true beginning point or 0 point when the interval data have meaningful intervals between measurements. And the last one would be the ratio scale. So when ratios between measurements as well as intervals are meaningful, there is a starting point or 0 point. It is also considered as the highest level of measurement. As you can see here at the background, you see there that ratio is on the top of the, if that is a staircase, on top of the staircase. Okay. We will now be discussing each type of level of measurements one by one. So the first in the list is the nominal scale. The word nominal originates from the Latin root nomen, meaning name. It is a method assessment in which numbers fills in as labels or names for the purpose of recognition or grouping an item. A nominal scale measurement usually works with non-numeric variables or qualitative variables, or where there is no value in numbers. So let us see here some examples of what we mean by there is no value in numbers, and they are just used for classification or recognizing objects. So consider the jersey of basketball players, volleyball players, or any other sports where there is a number at their back. So what is the purpose of having those numbers at their back? Main purpose of that is for identification, right? So that we know who that particular player is. But those number doesn't reflect the athlete's or the person's ability, okay, to play the game. So we are all familiar with the owner of the jersey number 23 in Chicago Bulls, right? And that is none other than Michael Jordan. And so we all know that for these numbers, they are used for identification. Okay. And as well for the plate numbers of vehicles. So these plate numbers for vehicles, so it corresponds to the owner of that particular vehicle, and it is not concerned with the characteristics of the said vehicle. So that's why during accident or crime, we should be able to memorize, okay, the plate number of the vehicle involved so that it can help in the investigation, so that we can determine the owner of that particular vehicle. But in the Philippines, it is not just the plate number that you should be familiarized of, but also the type of vehicle, the color of the vehicle. And you know the reason why? Because they can tamper the plate number. Unlike in other countries that people are very, can I say that they are honest? So they don't do that kind of stuff. Okay. So again, numbers don't characterize the characteristics identified with the object. So each number is assigned to one item. So I have an example as well, like the SSS number. So one SSS number for one person, the same with the tax identification number. So here are examples wherein we use a number, but these numbers are not used for anything, but just for identification. One we have here is the behavioral pattern. One for extrovert, two for introvert, and three for ambivert. We also have here the different hair color, like auburn for one, black number two, blonde three, four for brown, and five for the other colors not mentioned above. And then we also have here the different degree or levels of discomfort. Okay, so one for mild, two for moderate, and three for severe. I guess you are familiar with this, right? With this one, which I'm going to tell you. I've heard about the GCQ level 4, and something like that. There are different levels, and those levels are used for identification, right? So the same with typhoon signal number. So when we say typhoon signal number 1, so what does it tells us? That is a very weak, no, not really very weak, but there is a certain value for the wind speed. Okay, and if that is category 5 or signal number 5, expect that the speed of the wind would be above 200 kilometers per hour, so something like that. So those numbers are used for identification purposes. So the analysis of gathered data will happen using percentages or mode. In other words, the most common answer is received for the question, right? So we defined mode as the most frequently occurring value. So in here, I will show you an example of a research wherein it involves identifying one's gender. So one female and two for female. Again, those numbers are for identification only. So let's say, for example, you have 45 respondents and you would like to determine the gender of each respondent. So this would be the number of the respondents, okay, 45. And the numbers you see here, 1 and 2, would correspond to their specific gender type. Okay, so what would be the most frequently occurring value? So you would see that the most frequently occurring value or the most common answers received for this particular question is number one. And that number one is for female. Okay, so here 18 for male and 27 for female with a total of 45. Okay, so this is the equivalent diagram of our data here. Okay, so it says here that there are 18 male and 27 female. Beside that, you would see the percentages. Okay, so 18% is equal to 40%, 27 is equal to 60% of 45. So how did we come up with these values of 40 and 60? So 18 divided by 45 times 100 would give you 40%. And then 27 divided by 45 times 100 is 60%. Okay, so that's how a nominal scale data or result looks like. Okay, so we can just determine the mode, and we cannot do anything about it anymore, just the mode, and then we just show it in a diagram or in a graph, and that's it. That's how we interpret these numbers that we have here. So the nominal scale is again the least measurement type because it does not capture data about the central item other than whether the item has a place or doesn't have a place with a given class. The nominal scale frames for the reasons for these exams. That's why we have here the ANOVA or the analysis of variance, which is another one type of statistical analysis or statistical tests. So what does ANOVA measure? It measures about the significant difference of two variables. Okay, so in here we are given two or more variables. So we are given here examples below. So is there a significant difference between men versus women in terms, let's say, for example, basketball performance? Is there a significant difference between the IQ level of people with red hair versus those with fair hair versus those with black hair? And is there a significant difference between the performance of athletes if they are African American versus Asian athletes? Okay. The second level of measurement is the ordinal scale. The word ordinal means arrange. Okay, so this reports the data's positioning without setting the level of variation between them. You can be named, grouped, and positioned. So the ordinal data are quantitative data, meaning the data that we have in our study is quantitative in nature, meaning we deal with numbers. So for this example on the right, there is this particular school with 2,959 students. So if we are going to determine the data's position, okay, in terms of number of enrolled students, we would give the highest rank or the first rank to the freshman because it has the most number of enrollees, and that is 1,109. The second rank would be given to the sophomores with 800 enrolled students. Third would be for the seniors with 750 enrolled students, and the last rank would be given to the juniors with 300 enrolled students. So the ordinal scale shows the overall position of variables in addition to recognizing and portraying the extent. The interval properties here are not known measurements of non-numeric traits. For example, recurrence, fulfillment, joy, and so forth. In expansion to the data given by the nominal scale, ordinal scale recognizes the position of the variables. Okay. So what are the key advantages of ordinal scale? One is the simplicity of the correlation between variables. Correlation is another statistical test. or one of the statistical analysis used. And what does it answer? It answers the relationship between two or more variables. Okay, is there a relationship between the two? So ordinal scale is effectively used in reviews, surveys, and polls due to analytical and classification effortlessness. Gathered reactions from respondents are compared effortlessly with making significant determinations about the interest group intended. And lastly, the results are more educational compared to the nominal scale, as the values are demonstrated in a relative manner using a linear rating scale. So examples we have here during your grade school and high school. So in a graduating class, the one with the highest score will be your valedictorian. The second student with the highest score would be your salutatorian, followed by the honorable mentions. Okay, so they are ranked just like in the Miss Universe competition. So you have there the first runner-up, second runner-up, something like that. And in sports as well, third place, second place, and first place. So there is a particular order or groupings involved. As mentioned from the previous slides, so the frequency of occurrence, questions such as how frequently do you take a bath? Not at all, not often, often, or very often. Okay, just a sidetrack. So, how frequently do you have to get your phone repaired? So, not at all, not often, often, and very often. Evaluating the degree of agreement. Identify the level of agreement with the policies of the company. Totally disagree, disagree, neutral, agree, or totally agree. Or we can have the order of preference. So what if you are given a choice? If you have the money to buy a new laptop for yourself, which brand will you buy or will you prefer? Is it Acer, Dell, Lenovo, Apple, or HP? And then we also have here about the customer service. Okay, so let's say you dined into a restaurant, and then at the end of your stay there, you would be evaluating the store in terms of the cleanliness and the taste or appearance of the food that you ate. So are you number one, very unhappy, or two, unhappy, neutral, happy, or very happy with the customer service? Or are you satisfied with the products you bought? Totally satisfied, satisfied, neutral, dissatisfied, totally dissatisfied. We are now on the third measuring level, and that is the interval scale. The interval scale is characterized as a quantitative measurement scale where there is a significant difference between two variables. Remember, the idea of this scale is the interval, which links to the separation between two variables. So here are the characteristics of the interval scale. Between two variables, you can deduct values that include the distinction between a pair of variables. And second is that the interval scale permits to ascertain the mean and median of variables. Since it is quantitative in nature, so we can now process the numbers that we have in our research. Unlike in the previous two, we are just using these numbers for references or for labels and identification. Here we can then do the median and the mean. So what is meant by between two variables? You can deduct or subtract values. So let us see here the fishes caught by Joe or Joe. So if you are going to get the interval, okay, of the first fish and the second fish, okay, tail to tail, perhaps, that would be 4 inches. Comparing the second and the third fish, that would be 10 inches, and that's the interval. And then comparing the third and the fourth fish, that would be 6 inches interval. Okay, so that's what's meant. We can deduct or subtract. So the next characteristic is the proximity of zero is subjective. This means that a genuine and equivalent separation is the difference between two variables on a given scale. So we have here a value of zero is arbitrary or subjective because negative values of temperature do exist. Okay, so if the temperature registered to be equal to 0 Fahrenheit or 0 degree, that zero doesn't mean the absence of temperature, right? So that's it. That is what's meant by arbitrary or subjective. This one is the best example. Why? Because the Celsius and Fahrenheit degree contains the negative values. So we know that if that is below zero, the temperature gets colder and colder. Okay, it doesn't mean that if the temperature becomes negative, the empty, the empty, the empty, the empty, or the the non-existent, the non-existent, the non-existent it becomes. Okay. Okay, so remember that zero here is just arbitrary. Doesn't mean the absence of anything. So what we mean by interval, so 38 and 48, 101 and 91, if you subtract these both, it would be 10 degrees Celsius. So the interval is equal for these two cases. But we have to take note of this. You cannot, so meaning we are not allowed to say that the temperature of warm and chilly of 2 degree Fahrenheit is thrice that of 6 degree Fahrenheit. Why? Because we're not allowed to divide to get the ratio between these two. Okay. We're just allowed to get the interval or the difference. So if you are going to take the difference, it would be just 4 degree Fahrenheit, but you would not report it as thrice the temperature of 2 degree Fahrenheit. Okay, so kindly remember that. The inquiry types of interval scales are, first would be the Likert scale, one of the most commonly used interval scale question. The question is organized during a 5-point Likert scale question, 5 points. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That denotes different varieties of feelings. So completely agree up to completely disagree. Okay, so you just choose which answer, which description best describe your feeling. And then we have the Net Promoter Score. In this interval question, the inquiry is asked using a Net Promoter Score or NPS question where the respondents answer on a scale of 1 to 10. That they are so inclined to refer a friend to an organization, item, or administration and help probably in computing how cheerful a client is or is not. So you have here detractors, passives, and promoters. Okay, so you would see here a sad face and the different degrees of being sad. Okay, so if you get a red one, so you would not refer your friend to a particular organization, item, or administration. If you have here the no reaction, like emoji, passives with level 7 and 8, perhaps that means that's okay. Well, you can. That's all right. And if you get the green ones with the smiley face, that means you're a promoter with the levels 9, 10. So you would refer a friend. Friend, you go enroll here. Friend, you buy this product. This is excellent. It is worth the money, right? So there, promoters. And then you have the bipolar matrix table. The bipolar scale is a specific type of rating scale characterized by a continuum between two opposite endpoints. So these are your two endpoints, and they have opposite descriptions here. Okay. So sweet, bitter, fair, unfair, warm and cold, beautiful and ugly, meaningful or meaningless, bright or dark. So let's say, for example, you bought a car or somebody you bought a car. And then you are asked, is it a beautiful or ugly car? So if you answered, that is a wrong decision because the car is ugly, so you'd mark it very ugly. You mark it two. Oh, that is a right choice. It's the best choice because it's too beautiful and it's worth it's worth the money. Or you bought an air conditioning system. So does it give you a very cold air? Yes, it's very cold. It's like you are in Antarctica. Or I don't know why it is called air conditioning system because the air coming out from that AC is warm. Okay. Or if you're asked about the taste of a certain food, it's not too bitter, it's not too sweet. It's just okay. So that is the zero. Okay. So the bipolar scale has the advantage that it measures both the direction and intensity. So that is the intensity, distance from the center of the respondent's position on the concept of interest. And now we are down to the fourth measurement level, and that is the ratio scale. This type of measurement is under the quantitative category. So we can do something with the numbers we have. This scaling ratio contains the most extravagant data about an item. This contains the majority of the data of the aforementioned measurements. It also has an absolute zero point, which is different from the arbitrary or subjective zero of the interval scale. So how is the absolute zero point different from the arbitrary or subjective zero? So let us consider this one. So we have here a graduated cylinder that measures the volume of a particular liquid. Okay. So if you see that the level of that particular liquid is to this line, so you would say that it is 5 ml. If that is to this line, that is 2 ml. But if you don't see anything, okay, that means nothing. Okay, what we mean by absolute zero, when you say zero, there is really nothing. It doesn't exist. So just like the money right now in your wallet, it's empty. It's zero. I have no money and money is not existent in my wallet. So that is an absolute zero point. Okay, so there. So age, if the age is zero, perhaps the object hasn't been made or the organism hasn't been born yet. That's why the age is zero. And the weight is zero. So if there is no difference in the weight, you would have a zero. Or if you are weightless, or your weight is zero, meaning you are floating because you're so light. And then you also have here these for statistical surveying. So it answers for the values, number of clients, piece of the pie, and so forth. So about the number of clients, let's say for example, in a dental clinic. So at the end of the day, they will be reporting how many clients they have for that day. So if they say, or if they indicate in the report that it's equal to zero, meaning no client went there for their service. It's the absence of something. Okay, total absence. As discussed, a ratio scale is characterized by an absolute zero trademark. The 0 point trademark makes it applicable or meaningful to state one article has double the length of the other or is twice as long. So here we are or we can say this. Unlike in the interval, we cannot. Okay, but here we can say this because we can now do this following arithmetic inquiry. We can add, subtract, increase, and divide variables. Hence the word ratio. We can divide. So let's say 6 over 2, and that is thrice. 4 over 2, that is twice. Okay? So all statistical analysis can be determined utilizing ratio scale. Additionally, a chi-square can be determined by utilizing the ratio scale variable. Again, a chi-square is a one type of statistical tests. Okay, so here are examples of questionnaires for ratio scale. Identify your height in feet and inches. So less than 5 feet up to greater than 6 feet. Okay. Identifying one's weight, less than 50 kilograms up to more than 110 kilograms. And then we have here identify the number of hours you spend daily on watching TV, less than 2 hours, 3 to 4 hours, 4 to 5 hours, 5 to 6 hours, or more than 6 hours. Okay? Good luck to your electricity if that is more than 6 hours. And then your AC is on. Okay? So here is another qualified statement for a ratio wherein we can use the word twofold or twice because we can divide 100 kilometers per hour by 50 kilometers per hour and the quotient is equal to 2. So 100 is to 2 is to 50 will have a ratio of 2 is to 1. Okay. Okay. So this is the summary and it will show you why nominal is considered as the least of them all, and ratio is the most extravagant of them all. As you can see here, the more number of yeses you have, the more extravagant it is. And the fewer or the lesser the number of yeses or yes you have, the least. So just like here, nominal can only determine the mode. Okay. Is there a sequence? Can we arrange the data that we have? No. But yes, for the other three levels of measurement. Can we determine the median? Again, another no, sadly. But yes, for the three levels of measurement. Can we determine the mean? Yes, for the interval and ratio, but not for our two qualitative research, nominal and ordinal. Difference, meaning subtraction between variables can be evaluated. Yes, we can for the both, not for these two, nominal and ordinal. Addition and subtraction is not allowed here, but yes for the two. Multiplication and division, yes for ratio, but not for the three. Is there an absolute zero? Yes, but not in the three levels of measurements. Okay, so that ends our virtual class for today. So let me know if you have a question about the topic that we have discussed for this morning. 11:11.